Abbas Tijani joins me on the What Now to discuss this pandemic as death toll keeps rising. Good to have you join us, Abbas Tijani. Let's start from the UK, where you are. Today we're seeing that the UK recorded its 2 worst days in a row for the coronavirus, and now the country is on a much worse trajectory for death than China. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, there's been, like you rightly said, an increase of 569 between yesterday and today. We topped the figure from the previous day, which was 535. Right now, the UK has almost 3,000 victims who have died from COVID. But the overwhelming message has been testing. In the UK, the authorities have been slandered have been taken on for not doing adequate testing. Currently, the UK has a capacity to do 12,000 tests in a day, but they're actually doing 10. However, they've been charged to increase to up to 20,000 testing by the end of this month, and hopefully, with adequate testing, they'll be able to map out the key corridors where this virus is really taking more effect in the UK.
We also see that the government is looking to expand the lockdown to 6 months. There is that possibility of an expansion of the lockdown. What's informing that?
Well, obviously, if you're looking at the current statistics from all over the world, from Europe, going by the two-week critical period, the UK actually is actually following that path. And if you're looking at that number vis-a-vis the population, 6 months appears to be the figure the experts are coming up with. It could be much less, it could be more.
All right, so one of the areas that we're beginning to see some sort of worry or concern from the EU, the United Nations, is around migrants and refugees. In places like South Africa, Bangladesh, Greece, we see that there is this hostile or unfavorable environment for refugees and migrants in this time. What can be done to ensure that they are also safe in this pandemic?
The biggest challenge is most of these zones are war zones or zones that have had consistent crises. Most of them have had to be dealing with housing refugees and catering for them, and then COVID comes along. How do you incorporate that into the existing problem of war? And that's the biggest challenge. As it is right now, pretty much every nation is having to deal with its own population. We have great powers like the United States reaching out to other parts of the world, needing support from other parts of the world. So most of these home countries where this crisis happened do not have the capacity to deal with a lot of these refugees. A really grim situation looking forward.
All right, so you are a broadcaster, so you know a thing or two about fake news, and we see that during this time there is an increase in fake news, and we see how people are receiving information from different quarters, and the UK government is looking to also clamp down on fake news. What do you think can be done to ensure that people are getting the information they need at the time they need it?
Well, first and foremost, there are people out there who take advantage of situations like this just to put out information to mislead and misguide the public. If you look at Russia, Russia has come out with or is working on a very, very drastic law to deal with anybody caught as high as 5 years imprisonment for anybody seen putting out fake news. And I think this should be the path to follow. Strong, heavy punitive measures against anybody or any group putting out information that can mislead or detract from the main information for COVID-19.
Sometimes this is quite difficult to track because it's almost what you send to one person, especially on WhatsApp, you send to one person who sends to 20 other people and 50 other people. So it's quite difficult to track as to who to punish for that particular news. So what can be done in that kind of situation?
Well, first and foremost, you have two sets of people. You have those who are misguided, those who don't know, two who are really trying to help and in their bid to help put out anything that comes in their direction. First and foremost, people should make sure that whatever information they're putting out is something that has come from all the official quarters, be it on any platform you are. I think that is absolutely key. And for the others, and more importantly, for those who actually create information, disinformation, those are the ones that I think that are the most important to tackle to start with, because if you don't take care of that, then they push out information to all and sundry out there who, at the click of a button, easily push the message messages forward in the hope to help and mistakenly do that.
All right, so again, because you are a broadcaster, and we've talked so much about health workers who actually should be celebrated at this time. I mean, they are heroes. But we also know that we have journalists on the front line who are reporting this. And recently we saw the death, sadly, of I think a Zimbabwean broadcaster, Zororo Makamba, who, you know, he was 30 years old. So how can journalists protect themselves while reporting this?
Well, first and foremost, it depends in terms of your position and how close you are to the health authorities. First, if I look at the health authorities in the UK, the biggest challenge in the UK is the lack of adequate equipment in terms of care. So that is a major crisis the UK particularly is dealing with. So if you're a journalist, you need to total the path of the system in terms of, first and foremost, your gear, your positioning. Where are you reporting from? Are you in hospital? In hospital, you need to follow the lead of health authorities there. That is absolutely important. And in regions where it's much harder, perhaps in Africa, you need to take extra care.
And let's talk about the health sector, because beyond just the pandemic, there are those who are actually having other medical conditions and who might not be able to get adequate treatment, you know, at this time. How do we also begin to ensure that the health sector, especially in places like Africa, in a place like Africa, where we already have limited medical capacity, that we do not overstretch the health sector at this time?
It's again, the health sector would be overstretched. I was listening to just a few days ago where he was actually saying that every region of the world needs to devise or design a specific way, a regional specific way to tackle COVID-19. So the Chinese came up with theirs. In America is different, in Europe is different, and I think Africa needs to do something different. As it is right now, the health sector is overstretched. And by all indications, it would get worse. So first and foremost, everybody should follow the rule, stay indoors. Let's limit the spread of the virus. The easiest way to kill it right now is to isolate it by staying indoors. And that is the first and most important message I think needs to go out. The more people do that, then there will be room, hopefully, to deal with people dealing with other issues. Remember, the biggest victims from this particular scourge are those who have underlying medical conditions. So as it is in Africa right now, the first and most important message would be for everybody to stay indoors, and then you can take it from there.
All right, staying in Africa, do you think that African leaders are doing enough to contain this virus, seeing that there is this warning from, you know, World Health Organization that Africa could be the next hub, in quote, for this virus? What, do you think we're doing enough, and what more can we do?
Well, we've heard some positive messages initially coming out of most parts of Africa, Nigeria being a typical one. Unlike most parts of the world that appear to take time to jump on it, it appears that most African nations jumped on it very, very quickly. You see information and videos going around of law enforcement agencies trying to instill the message of people to stay at home. So in that regard, yes. In terms of the medical side of things, if we're looking at the upward trajectory that the pattern going around the whole world, my fear is when it comes to Africa in the next couple of weeks, the challenge will be how the health system in Africa would cope with this. It's a very, very worrying prospect. Like I said, Nigeria appears to have taken a good lead at the very, very beginning, but then it's getting to the crunch time when perhaps the lack of adequate facilities might start to show, and that is very, very worrying.
All right, so there's just a lot to talk about on this, but that's the much we can take at this time. Broadcaster Abbas Tijani, many thanks for your time on this issue.
My pleasure.